Um, we made it school alive are true accounts of my in-person experience with kids before COVID. And oftentimes I would, just decompress and just really listen to my students' stories. And a lot of the stories also derive from just, pausing and listening to my students. One particular story that really galvanized me to write We Made the School Alive was a young man who came to me towards the end of the school day and naturally confided in me. And he said, Mr. Harris, can you call my mom and tell her to pick me up? And I said, but don't you walk to school and from school? And he said, I do, but I always hear gun violence. I always hear bullets and gunshots. And for me, I was just started thinking about, his experience or reimagine his experience walking to school and walking from home. And in spite of him hearing gun violence and hearing gunshots, he still made the school alive and he made it home alive. And that sort of catapult like this whole idea of like, we made the school alive, but also I wanted to make sure that I did not evade from the environmental concerns, inequities in the school system. I know me personally, I teach in a public school, and I know that schools are under-resourced, particularly in the public sector. I know that under-resourced schools, and I also know that there's a huge opportunity gap. So I want to make sure that I was unpacking those stories to sort of kind of bring a perspective from a teacher who happens to be a writer, and just tell these stories to provide some humanity and ensure that people are honoring the humanity of students. There's a poem in there which is entitled Alive, and people I find seem to really connect with that poem, and that really is a poem about me sort of allowing my students to unravel. I think sometimes, we're always thinking rigor, 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 teach, 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 but sometimes I think we should create space for kids to be. And that looked like really me allowing my kids to just run around, play with, use their imagination, interact. There was no perimeters on what they could do as long as they wouldn't harm each other, and they never did, right? So just creating that sense of aliveness. And sometimes people will walk in my classroom and they look a little puzzled as if like there's nothing happening, but life was happening. And I want to make sure that I was honoring that space. Poems also depict stories about, the race relations, between officers and black boys. And one particular poem that I was sort of moved by was an encounter watching my son charge after a butterfly. And the butterfly did not flutter, did not move. And it remained perched, as I said in this poem. And I just had this sort of vision of, black boys, charging after a butterfly, and a butterfly doesn't flutter, doesn't move, and yet a insect is not fearful of a human being. Meanwhile, officers claim that they are fearful when they come encounter with a black boy. So I had this vision of like butterflies bursting out of them, right? And these kids raising their arms, their hands in the air to prove they're unarmed. And I say, 100 mahogany butterflies burst out of them like lightning, joining hands with fireworks, and just the beauty of blackness. And the poem concludes by saying, in the end, God said, let there be light, and a butterfly boy as black as the beginning appeared in the flesh. And just thinking about blackness as being the reason we are able to see light, darkness is a form of beauty. So I just want to provide some humanity around color. And the book was, I did not expect the reaction that I got because this book was written in a maroon space. I wasn't really thinking about publication. I just wanted to really document, almost like journaling, right? Like they say teachers should be reflective and they should write. And me being a poet, a lot of my sort of, reflections, I suppose, or journaling was just in poetic form. And it just sort of kind of just became this collection of poetry. And I think that what it's doing right now, it is allowing teachers, parents, to just really have a stronger sense of what's happening in school. And I like to think that I am a very heavy image-based writer, so I want you to not only feel but see what's happening through literature. And I like to think I accomplished that through We Made the School Alive. And, what's funny is, sometimes, when I'm brave, I open up the book and I read it when someone tells me their reactions to the poem. And, one particular poem I still read over and over again is the very first poem, which is entitled, I believe it's entitled Alive. Don't quote me on that. Just have to get my book to find out. But it's really a story about a young, because our school is a K to 8. So you have a lot of kids who have siblings that happens to go to the same school. And it's just, every morning, you just watch kids. You don't know where they're walking home from. You don't know, you have no idea where they're coming, what type of conditions they're walking through. You just don't know. But, I wanted to paint this picture of the environment that I teach in. There is this narrative that is a violent, it's a violent area. And I just wanted to, in spite of that, I wanted to just sort of document two siblings walking to school together. And, a brother, holding his little brother on his back, and I describe ravens. I describe, a kid playing hopscotch inside chalk outlines. And I'm really just trying to sort of really localize the beauty in everything that we may perceive as deadly, or everything we may perceive as bleak. And, but sporadically throughout the poem, you'll hear poems that are a bit grueling, and might be a bit hard to take in, but I make a point to make sure that I'm defining their humanity, and I'm honoring it. Another particular poem that I was reminded about this poem, how it connected with someone else, was a poem about, which I'm thinking about it, kind of gives me chills, but it was my particular school that I teach at the time, still doesn't have, central air. So as you can imagine, the summer was grueling. It was hot, unbearable, smoldering. And, although I will bemoan sometimes about not having, AC in the building, it occurred to me that a lot of my students don't have AC at home. And I remember on the last day of school, you tell the kids, you direct them to take home their books and, the things, their supplies and everything that they sort of interface with throughout the academic year. And as I'm telling kids, take your books, take your notebooks, take your book bag, take everything, your shoes, everything, because sometimes kids will leave shoes at school. A lot of different things. A kid comes behind me, he has a fan, and he's holding the fan. He says, I'm taking the fan home because, I want to make sure that my mom and my little sister, they're cool. So I'm taking the fan home, and I'm just watching this black, beautiful boy walk down the street with a fan in his hand. And for me, that just show the level of care that black kids have, not just for themselves, but for the community around them, for the people that they love. So yeah, We Made a School Alive. I think it is about aliveness. It is about humanity. It is about the very kids that when you see, we might just see color, we might just see a boy, we might see gender, we might see all these different things, but what we don't see is the intrinsic lives and what they experience day by day, and the love they have to offer to the world and the contributions that they have to offer. So I just hope that when you're reading my book, you're really just really marveled by the beauty of every realm of blackness, and you really can have a understanding of why it's important that kids feel like they are accepted, that they are recognized, and that they are see beyond their skin, and just focus on that intrinsic value that they all have. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoy it, and I believe there will be copies available at Lakewood Public Library. And yeah, thank you for the time that you've allotted to me to just hear me rant about my second collection. And in closing, I'm excited to share that I am a contracted writer now, so meaning I have a literary agent, so I am working on my debut YA novel. And I look forward for the world to be able to not only acknowledge me as a poet, but also acknowledge me as an immersion novelist.